What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Leading to a Higher Altitude podcast. My name is Forrest Pritchett, and I'm the IFC Vice President of Public Relations. Today, I'm joined by Keiron Timothy, who works over at the Counseling Center. So, Keiron, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Forrest. Pleasure to be with you on the podcast. Like you said, my name is Keiron Timothy. I'm one of the counselors over at the Embry-Riddle Counseling Center over at the Daytona Beach campus. I'm also a member of Alpha Phi Alpha, the Rose-Eye chapter, Spring 05.
Awesome. So we'll just go ahead and start with the interview questions, if that's okay with you.
Sounds good.
The first question is going to be, why do you think that men are often less likely to seek help for mental health struggles?
That's a good question. I think that predominantly it's the medium of going to a mental health care provider for help. Men tend to struggle with just help-seeking practices in general. And the process is really new and at times unknown to the individual as they're going in. It's a little bit different than going into your physical doctor where, you've been going to doctor's appointments from the time you were a kid up to present day. But for a lot of folks, the first time that they consider really making any steps to address their mental health concerns or to talk to someone, they might have never had any experience, or they may have never gotten any firsthand accounts from a friend or family member of what that experience is like. So it can be intimidating to experience a new thing. Additionally, counseling requires a level of vulnerability and openness that isn't really modeled often or encouraged in men. So it can be a really daunting first-time experience, not having the words to express what might be going on or even knowing where to begin can sometimes be an impeding factor to going into the counseling center or into counseling in general for the first time. Oftentimes the message that's received is that I can do it on my own. That's like a message that a lot of men, a lot of guys receive, that if there is something that's going on that needs to be addressed, that I, and maybe I alone, might be in the best position to help or assist in that. And I think that that's also really supported in the mental health experience as well. Like going into counseling, I'll describe it sometimes as seeking out a physical trainer to help with your fitness goals. You can do it on your own, and you can make gains. But if you really want to be efficient and potentially expedite that process, having a personal trainer is going to make it that much easier and help you stay on track, address any stumbling blocks or obstacles. So while it isn't something that is going to be entirely done on your own, it does require your effort. It's not going to the counselor for them to fix or help the problem, which can sometimes be a deterring factor for some men, that I need to go to someone else for them to help fix this problem. It's really that they're going to be assisting and aiding in the work that you're already doing in helping you move towards that goal in a better way.
I really like that analogy about the personal trainer. I never really thought of it that way, but that definitely puts it in perspective for sure. And then the second question kind of goes hand in hand with the first question, but important to talk about as well. And it's, how do cultural ideas of masculinity impact men's mental health?
I think the biggest way is that those ideas tend to put men in a box in terms of what's okay, like manliness, masculinity, everything resides in that box, and everything that falls outside of that box is unmanly, right? So things that might be outside of that box for some reason would be things like emotions, concerns, ideas that if I'm addressing feelings, that it's a sign of like weakness or some deficit or challenge that exists for the person. And Forrest, I believe you're aeronautical science.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I like to think or consider feelings and emotions, especially when I'm talking to my pilots, that it is an indicator of something that's changed in your circumstances and situations. So it's not necessarily a good or bad thing, and it's not a sign of weakness to acknowledge the presence of an emotion, but that there is something that's changed in my circumstances, and I need to acknowledge it so that I can arrive at a good solution and the most appropriate solution for that thing. So as you're flying and you see an indicator light come on in the cockpit, you're going to want to be able to observe that and then make sense of it. Like, what does that light mean? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it impacting like my safe flight operation? And what's the appropriate measure or step that I need to take to have a good outcome in that particular situation. But oftentimes, if emotion falls outside of the manliness box, then we don't even notice that indicator light when it goes off. And because we don't notice it, we don't respond to it well, but we experience some of the negative or adverse effects that comes downstream from it. Yeah.
Once again, an amazing analogy there, especially for me being a pilot. That, again, puts it in perspective. And, yeah, there's a reason you're a professional at this. All right, we'll jump into the next question. So how can fraternity members specifically support each other's mental health well-being in a healthy, sustainable way?
Well, I don't know if you're familiar, Forrest, but like one of the gravest like concerns, mental health concerns that younger generations facing, specifically men are facing, is like the advent of loneliness. Being a part of a fraternity, like you already have like this tremendous asset that you belong to this community. So it's really being able to utilize the advantage of being a part of like a ready-made and ready-formed community. So providing opportunities for connection, for fellowship, time spent together, directed towards a purpose. So whether that's community service or hosting an event, but also in recreation, just enjoying spending time together and providing opportunities for conversation and connection. Seeking, looking at for your brother and asking like, how are you doing? How are you doing really? There's, I don't know if you're familiar with Trevor Noah, the comedian.
Yeah, definitely.
He talks about maintaining his friendships and being kind of like multinational in terms of like what his life kind of looks like, traveling between South Africa and all over the world. It's really important for him to stay connected with his friends. And he says that he has this practice that he's modeled over time with his friends where they'll get together, on a kind of quarterly basis or every few months or a couple months or so. And at some point while they're enjoying the beach or skiing or whatever, they'll have a dinner where they'll ask like, how are you doing? And then they'll say, how are you doing really, right? Because the short answer to that is like, I'm good, everything's
right.
okay, I'm kind of chilling. But really giving the people in our lives and the people that we're in close proximity with, so that might be your brothers, that might be other IFC members, that sort of thing, access to ask those questions and to give them an earnest response, right? Like that's how we show the support that I'm wanting to ask the question, but I'm actually also interested in what the answer is to it. Because so often we can get into that autopilot of like, I'm good, and just kind of push on and keep it moving. But knowing that the person is willing to hear the real answer to it creates the safety for you to kind of go there if you need to. And sometimes people won't, it's my professional job to ask these questions, and I'll ask questions of clients, and they are like, oh, like I'm good. And, I try to be non-judgmental and open and friendly and all of that type of stuff. But it might not be until the fourth time that we meet and I ask them a very similar question that they give me the actual answer, right? So it's not necessarily a one and done, but it's like continuing to create and cultivate the spaces for that to happen. Oftentimes for men, we don't typically do face-to-face as well in terms of opening up and vulnerability, but we'll do shoulder to shoulder. So if we're doing something, we might have like some more of those conversations that could be a little bit more revealing and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that like one of the reasons that I originally joined my chapter, because I joined a little bit later in college, sophomore year, was to kind of have that to fall back on.
Mm-hmm.
So like, somebody to go to that actually cares what you're saying.
Yeah.
And not that I didn't have friends that did, but, a real community, a small community of people that do care. And then another thing I think some of our chapters do, I know my chapter does, is actual sessions to, just sit down and talk about what's going on.
Yeah.
How are you actually feeling?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I've definitely championed for in my chapter to keep doing, because I think
amazing.
I think it definitely helps. Especially when people don't necessarily want to be vulnerable in front of the entire chapter, like during a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
But it's it's normally a group of 5 to 10 people, and we go around the room and we talk, and then if you don't want to talk there and you just want to listen, that's always accepted too, because sometimes it takes a person a few experiences of listening to other people get vulnerable to feel comfortable to go do that. So
because you model it, right? And you give permission and provide a broader, like you expand that box. We were talking about that masculinity box,
right,
where maybe there's the thought of this is what it means to be a man, right? Joining a fraternity, like they're going to give me a model of what it means to be a man, but I'm also coming into it with maybe my assumptions of, it's going to be like the movies. It's going to be like Animal House, and that might be a dated reference, but but it's going to be kind of like that. But having like upperclassmen, like guys that have been in the chapter for a longer time, saying like, no, like this is also a part of what it means to be in a brotherhood. Not just that we have fun together and we enjoy spending time with each other, but we actually care about each other, and we're creating a space that reflects that. And then it creates that safety for the younger guys, or the guys that might be a little bit quieter, to say like, oh, I'm going to tap into that safety now and share what's going on.
Yeah, and I also totally agree with your point about connecting shoulder to shoulder instead of face to face, which I see that every day, and that's why I also for every chapter, I encourage you to go to as many events as you see feasible. Yep. Not only for you gain with leadership and experiences and having fun, but also because the more you go, the more connected and comfortable you feel around your brothers, and the more easily you'll be vulnerable. And some people aren't going through things all the time and handle it even better, but why not have that to fall back on if one day something happens and you don't feel good about it.
Yeah.
So you have that to go back to. So
it's made up of those little micro interactions. My wife and I, for a period in time, we worked at the same university, and we also had one vehicle at the time. So we'd carpool, to and from work and that type of stuff. And it was one of the best times, because in the car we're kind of shoulder to shoulder, right? Not kind of equating it to like a bro relationship, but it made it so where we had like tons of conversations on the ride to and from work, right? So with brothers, you're going to the service project, or you're going to whatever it is you're doing. Like those little moments, you can have like conversations that build the relationship, build the comfort. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so next question is, what can the fraternity community as a whole, or the interfraternity council community, do to play a role in reducing the stigma around mental health, men's mental health specifically?
Well, I think that today something like this is like huge, right? So as the oversight body of like the IFC, you're carving out a space to say, hey, this is something that we notice, and this is something that matters, and we're trying to do what we can to raise awareness to it, so that the conversation can start here, but it doesn't have to end here, right? And like the biggest thing around combating stigma is sharing of stories, right? So as we're talking about our familiarity or exposure to mental health topics, it normalizes it, because too often we might think of mental health as just one thing, right? Something that I've been working on with one of the professors out of the College of Aviation recently is, how do we increase like mental health literacy for pilots, kind of normalize the experience that, because you're human, you're going to have all of the human emotions and all of the human challenges that need to be addressed, right? And it's by creating opportunities for individuals to share what their own personal experience looks like. So it doesn't have to be hey, I was crashing out and everything was falling apart, because that's not what that mental health or that mental health related challenge might look like for that person. It might just be like, oh, this is a really, really strenuous week. Like, I've just had a lot on my plate and I'm dealing, but I'm real irritable. And I feel like I'm having to deal with it all on my own. And it's just like, man, like this is happening. I really need that break. It's just talking a little bit about that, personalizing the story, because then it's relatable, and it normalizes the fact that everyone has to pay attention to responding to their mental health needs in the same way that everyone has to eat, and we all have to pay attention to what our physical like hunger needs might be. What you might eat for lunch might be a little bit different than what I eat for lunch, but we both acknowledge that we need to do something about it. So I think this is a great step.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I think that like, at least from my experiences, like, being open and vulnerable and talking about things that are happening, even if it's not like something bad happened in your life, but just being busy. I deal with that a lot. I'm on IFC and in the fraternity and in school and flight and all that stuff. So I think for me, definitely, and what I've learned from some of my brothers is like, if you don't talk about it every time you feel it, not every time, but a lot when you're feeling that, okay, I'm busy, but I don't, I'm fine, but I'm not dealing with it the best right now. It just turns into something worse instead of just saying, I mean, even, a brother in the union sitting at one of the tables, like, how are you doing, man? Like, I'm super busy and I'm so tired. And, you know, if for me at least, that helps me just to kind of express what's going on and it not lead to, okay, I'm actually physically not doing good. Because I think they can go hand in hand sometimes.
Yep. There's that mind-body connection, like
Right.
how our body feels, our mind tends to follow, and vice versa. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There was one other thought that I had in terms of combating stigma. Like telling the stories would be one of the main primary thing, normalizing the experience, but then also like visibility and awareness. Like one of the things that you mentioned in talking about the podcast was that this podcast exists to provide accurate information as to like what it's like to be a part of the Greek community here and just being Greek in general. Because if you don't own that story, somebody else is going to tell that story, right? So like capturing it and being able to share it, participating, collaborating, attending events that have like somewhat of a mental health focus to it or a wellness bend to it. Long time ago, ages and ages ago, as a part of my fraternity, one of the things that we would do in our chapter is host conversations in chats. So there would be like a relevant topic that's going on, and we just invite our members, but also like the broader campus. We were on a really tiny university at St. Leo, but have those conversations and model like this is what we're kind of thinking. I got a chance to listen to one of the previous pods where Dean Bell was on, and he talked about the influence of the Greek community and that where the Greek community goes, the rest of the campus tends to follow. So if you guys are having these conversations, it gives like not necessarily permission, but it makes it easier for the rest of the campus to have those conversations as well. Yeah,
I think we've seen a lot of that recently, kind of like what Dean Bell said about, what the Greek community does, the campus community will follow. And we've done more events recently, not necessarily about mental health, but about hazing and, just things going on in, international Greek life. And we've actually seen a lot of, good input from people that aren't even part of the Greek life community.
Because there's visibility, right? You guys have numbers, and you wear your snazzy shirts, and people can see it.
Right. So that's been really cool to see, and I hope to, in the future, talk about mental health, outside of the podcast and more in a public space, and hopefully get some input from other campus organizations and stuff like that. So
that'd be awesome.
Yeah. And then last question for you here: what are some practical tools or strategies men can use daily to take care of their mental health?
So I'm vacillating between two answers for that question. One is sort of in a preventative way, right? So the things that reduces your vulnerability to experiencing more functional impairment as far as like mental health concerns. And there's a nifty little acronym which is called refreshers. In my space, we'll call them like therapeutic lifestyle changes or lifestyle medicine. So things that we're doing in our lifestyle to prevent the occurrence of illness or that sort of thing. So the acronym is refresher. So it is relationships, so investing in relationships, getting exercise. So physical activity, how I define exercise is 3 to 4 times a week, 30 minutes, right? You want to have opportunities for fun, so finding something that's enjoyable that you can do on a consistent basis, because accruing positive experiences makes life worthwhile. There's relaxation. So things that are fun might not be relaxing, right? Like if you enjoy surfing, like maybe that's more high intensity, or mountain bike riding or something like that. It could be fun, but it's not necessarily relaxing. Right. Relaxing is going to be the things that kind of recenter you and bring you back down to like equilibrium, to like a calm state, whether it's reading or enjoying a movie or something like that, something that kind of slows you down a little bit. Then we're gonna, I'm trying to go through the acronym in my head. We have after the R is going to be E, so we're going to have like a proper diet, eating well. About 20% of all the calories that we eat go towards fueling our brain, right? So that's so if we're not eating a lot, then our brain isn't functioning a lot, and our body physically feels that, our relationships feels that. We're shorter, we're snippier, we're going to struggle with like memory and recall and all of those other things. So eating well. Sleeping as best as we can. I know that's kind of tough in
yeah.
the college years, but sleep, trying to get as much sleep as possible that's consistent with what your demands might be. Helping others, right? So it makes us feel good to help others. And sometimes when we're stuck in a place where I don't know how to help the circumstances that I'm feeling, and maybe I feel hopeless, but if I can help someone else, then I know, or I get the experience that problems are temporary and that there are solutions to some problems, even though it's one that might feel insurmountable to me, right? So having that experience. E is touch grass, go outside, spend some time outside. It kind of broadens our perspective. So when we get trapped in our head and we're really stuck and kind of zoomed into our problems, going outside lets us know that there's a big world out there, and it kind of puts some of our concerns into perspective. And it also benefits us if we're in a room by ourselves, that going outside, we're likely to see other people and get a sense of, like, we're connected, we're a part of this bigger community, whether it's being an Embry-Riddle Eagle, being part of the Greek community, where we're connected to other people. And then the last one is R, is the reason. So having a reason to persist, right? So something that provides purpose and goals and directions towards us, because having a reason allows us to be a bit more resilient in enduring some of the challenges that we encounter. We can say, hey, I am running this mile, and halfway through I'm huffing and puffing, I'm aching, and for whatever reason I'm choosing to run this mile. It can keep us persisting towards the end of it, right? Yeah. I should have had a good reason as to why we're running a mile, but I think you get. For exercise. I think you get the gist. Yeah. I said 2, but I think that might be good. I'm going to stick with the refreshers.
Okay. I like that one a lot, especially the one you said about, maybe not necessarily, feeling like you can help yourself in the current state, but you do feel like you can help others. Things kind of puts it in perspective. Yeah. I think there's a lot, not to keep talking about pilots, but I think there's a lot of relation there, because, there's things that you struggle to learn about flying or managing an airplane, but then everybody says, and I've seen it, through people that I know, that, once you learn how to teach that, that kind of goes away. And not necessarily that it's a direct correlation, like, all of your mental health problems will just vanish once you know how to help somebody deal with them, but it can definitely help you have the tools to deal with it yourself. So,
but it also reminds me of something that Brené Brown says. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she says that resilient people are connected people. Because if you have connections and you're helping other people, you have relationships, it helps us know that we're resourced, right? That's kind of why we do societies. That's kind of why we do communities. Right. Because otherwise, I'm going to be dependent on solving all of my concerns on my own. Either I have to level up, and kind of upskill to be able to handle everything that life throws my way. Or if I know that I'm really good at some things, but I have some friends that are also really good at other things, then together we're kind of leveled up in that way. So it creates a sense of, like, in some ways, security that we experience as a part of that.
Yeah, and I think that also kind of goes back to, how important it is to have an open space to be vulnerable within your chapter, like kind of what we do, because there are people there that just go to listen, and maybe not they don't necessarily need to talk to everybody around to feel better, but they listen and they give advice, and that actually helps them. Yeah,
that vicarious learning too. Yeah,
and that's so cool to see, and so cool to be a part of too. So I definitely encourage every chapter organization to do something like that. So
it sounds like an awesome practice.
Yeah, for sure. So that's the end of the questions. This has been super informative and awesome. Do you have anything you would like to leave us with before we end it?
No, I just want to say thanks for having me on. I would love to continue to partner and collaborate with the Greek community. I know that that's one of the things that we're having conversations about back at the counseling center, is how we can make some inroads in specific communities on our campus to increase, like, the accessibility, the comfort of students kind of coming in and utilizing services. So I want to say thanks again, and looking forward to seeing all the Greek community around campus. Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you. I know for sure that as soon as all the IFC guys listen to this, they're going to want to have you coming back more and talking to us, and maybe some of your colleagues too. So I'm here for it. Yeah, this has been great. So anyways, thank you. This has been the Leading to a Higher Altitude podcast, and we will see you later.